Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about EarthBound. Like most people, I only knew about EarthBound from Super Smash Bros. Character Ness. But EarthBound is a game for the Super Nintendo. It's actually the second game in the Mother series, and I think there are 3 total if I'm not mistaken. EarthBound is probably one of the more accessible games in the Mother series. I don't know why it's called the Mother series. EarthBound is the one that is most frequently talked about. Also, probably because Mother 3 never came out with an official English translation either, so it's not exactly the most accessible game for us. EarthBound plays kind of like a traditional JRPG, however, the setting is very much not that, where it is, instead of a fantastical medieval setting, it takes place on a more modern setting, where you play as main protagonist Ness, and his main weapon is a baseball bat. And instead of spells, he has PSI abilities, or like psychic abilities. He's also accompanied by 3 other characters, Paula, Jeff, and for some reason his name is Pooh. Now, you are welcome to change the name of these characters, but if you don't care, then it automatically assigns these default names to these characters. You are also welcome to enter in your favorite thing to do, your favorite food, the name of your dog, and this just influences some of the text while you are playing through the game. The game initially starts where an asteroid lands next to your home, and you go to investigate it. When you come across this asteroid, you come across a bee named Buzz that's 10 years from the future and came from an asteroid to warn Ness that he is the chosen one and he must stop the evil overlord Gigas, I think is how that's pronounced. This game is very much a cult classic. After playing through this game, I can easily see why. It does a really good job to subvert your expectations and to really stand out among other games that you have played in the past. It's really cool to me that having played as many games that I have played, I can still come across games that provide new and fresh experiences for me, even if they're 30 years old at this point. There's a lot of humor and wackiness and randomness all overlaid with like a more serious undertone. And so it's an interesting theme, and I'm sure there's whole thesis videos that have been created about this video game, but it almost feels like you are experiencing it as a young kid, but it's almost like there's more than meets the eye when you are playing this game. But at the same time, you can like pick up all these little clues of more going on. For example, Ness really never talks to his dad in person. The only way that Ness communicates with his father is by picking up the phone and calling his dad, and this is your means of saving. Also, this is your means of getting currency, where instead of defeating enemies and getting currency immediately from them, I believe it goes to your dad, and then whenever you call your dad says he deposited this money into your account. And then you have to go to an ATM to deposit or withdraw your money. And so I've heard a couple theories as to like why Ness never really sees his dad. Mostly that he is busy at work, and that is the culture of the time in Japan where this game was made, is the dad is always at work, and so you never really get to see the dad. But dad is still always really nice to you whenever you call him, and he always says he's gonna hit the hay, and he warns you not to work too hard. But if you do talk to Ness's neighbors, Ness's neighbor tells you that they've loaned a lot of money to your dad as well, that your family is basically in debt. So I don't know, that's just like one example. I feel like there's a lot of other ones as well, especially like when you talk to all the characters and everybody has something like interesting to say, and sometimes it's really funny. I can't recall the amount of times that I've guffawed at the dialogue of the people that are talking to you, because sometimes it's like just so on the nose, but other times it's maybe a little more obscure and you have to kind of piece things together. Let's talk about combat now. This is a kind of traditional turn-based RPG. It is nice that playing a game this old that does have some modern features that we kind of take for granted now. When playing most games from 30 years ago, you're probably going to be doing random encounters, unlike this game where you see them in the overworld. Now, the enemies do move rather fast, so if you get too close to them, you're probably going to end up having to battle them, but it's nice having that feature. Another another one is if you are way higher level than the enemy, then you will automatically defeat them as well in order to save time. Another function is you have the capability of turning on auto battles, where your character will automatically use his basic attacks, and when needed, he will use his psychic abilities in order to heal up his party members. So these features just aren't really something that you see in games of that time, but I feel like they're more taken as like a modern kind of functionality. So it was nice to play a game that had some of that stuff. Now there is some old game clunkiness to this game as well. For instance, your inventory management can be rather clunky, where each party member has their own inventory, and it really isn't that much. If I was to guess, maybe they can hold like 16 or 18 different items at a time, and so when you're only playing as Ness, before you gather up your party members, you really need to manage your storage. Also, each character has their own equipment that they can wear. So for instance, if I wanted Jeff to hold the bracer that Ness has in his bag, then I need to transfer that item over to Jeff first before I can equip it. Another thing is they do have a storage system. However, you need to call your sister on the phone, and then she will send a delivery man to either deliver 3 objects to you or pick up 3 objects from you. And so in order to do some inventory management, you need to call the delivery, walk around, wait for the delivery person to come, and it's only like 3 items. So it's very clunky managing your inventory. I think what they really intended for you to do is to really be utilizing these items and equipment, especially once you gather the party member Jeff, who doesn't have access to psychic abilities, but his main gimmick is he uses items and he can repair broken items when you rest at inns. The funny thing is, while I really did like this game, the gameplay is probably the weakest part about the game, for me anyway. For one thing, it's pretty much just like a typical turn-based combat, which can get rather repetitive and boring, but the main joy and variety from this game comes from the enemy sprites, because rather than traditional medieval fantasy going against like dragons and elves and dwarfs and things like that, you're facing like modern day enemies, which are weird. Like you'll be going against skaters and hippies and taxi cabs and street signs, and the enemies are just really varied and wacky, which provides a decent amount of entertainment. Also, sometimes they do random abilities, or sometimes they won't attack you at all and say they're just looking around or doing some random action. Now, I do feel like this game really encourages you to use your psychic abilities as much as possible, as they do much more damage than your traditional attack. But I feel like since they wanted us to use psychic abilities so frequently, they should have given us more mana to do these abilities. I don't think it's called mana, it's called like PSI or something like that. But I feel like they should have given us more resources to do more spells if that was what they intended for our main attack to be. Status effects that enemies can inflict on you as well can be rather annoying, especially before you unlock certain psychic abilities in order to dismiss these. There's abilities where like ghosts can possess you, which have a chance of freezing you, or mushrooms on your head, which make you sometimes attack yourself or your party members. And it can be pretty tedious dismissing these status effects if you're not near a hospital, or do not have the required items in order to dismiss these status effects. But it is cool when you're fighting against enemies, and the perspective of this is very different than like a traditional JRPG, in that you are only looking at the enemy and you don't get to see your own party members, just the boxes with their stats at the bottom. But the backgrounds whenever you are in combat are just so psychedelic and wavy and colorful, with all these weird moving lines in the background. It's something that I haven't really seen in a game before. I do think I prefer seeing my own party members doing the actual attacks. Now, when you do a psychic ability, you will see this little like animation of the spell being done, but I wish I could see Ness or Pooh doing these attacks themselves. Your items are not like potions or things like that. They're more like typical like American food. You're eating burgers to heal, and pizza and soda, and you're taking more modern items in order to heal yourself instead of old-fashioned medieval kind of items. I do wish that since Jeff's main mode of attack is by using items, I wish that more of his items would work on the heavy-duty bosses. I had a lot of items that were supposed to inflict status effects or do certain things, and more often than not, whenever I tried to use these items as Jeff on the bosses, it just says that they don't work. Now, I will say Jeff probably has the strongest attack in the game, and that is use of the multi-bottle rockets, and these do a ton of damage. And later on in the game, you can access a vendor that will sell these to you. So I feel like it's kind of become a joke online where if you do encounter a troublesome boss or enemy, you just buy a bunch of multi-bottle rockets and it's pretty much like an automatic win. And so that is where Jeff comes in handy. But as far as just facing off against like normal enemies, he is probably one of the more useless of the party members. But aside from combat, I do enjoy the variety of the overworld, where the beginning of the game, you kind of are just more exploring these towns and these cities, and these towns can be quite large with a ton of people to talk to and hear interesting things they have to say, or explore and find items or little cutscenes. And I've got a little bored just exploring the towns and cities, and so I did follow a walkthrough for most of the game, and that told me where to go, who to talk to, because I feel like this game can be rather obscure. It's not exactly the most obvious thing on where to go or what to do, and so a walkthrough is beneficial. Now, each town does have a hint man. I'm not sure how on the nose he is about giving advice, or if he's rather obscure himself, because I had a walkthrough, so why would I pay money to talk to a hint man? But if you are anti-walkthroughs, that is a feature that you could potentially utilize. Before Ness faces off against Gigas, he needs to discover the 8 sanctuaries and collect the 8 different sounds and collect them in his sound stone. So these are basically just like, hey, you got these 8 different bosses that you gotta go to in order before you face off against the main guy. But I do like all these locations that you visit. It's fairly different from normal JRPGs that I've played in the past with different settings. Now, of course, you do still go to the desert level, and you go to the swamps, and you go to the fireplace, but you also go to a couple unique areas as well. For instance, one, the camera is panned back so far because the area is so big and your characters are so tiny, and there's just like a bunch of giant dinosaurs roaming around. Or there's one, you encounter like a lot of unique characters. For instance, one of my favorite villages are the Mr. Saturn villages, and the Mr. Saturns, they talk very different. The text is all weird, and it's kind of hard to read exactly what they're saying, but they're basically just like these little pink balls with big noses, and they're super friendly to you. You also encounter this race of these little tadpole-looking things, and they're too shy, and so you need to find a book at the library that says how to get over shyness and lend it to them, so then they're not shy and they will talk to you. So yeah, lots of really unique characters, very memorable, lots of unique villages and towns that you go through, and very, very random. Sometimes things happen for apparently no reason. For instance, for most of the game, when you go to certain key landmarks, a photographer will randomly spin out from the sky and land and take your picture, and then he'll spin back up into the sky, and it's not until after the game, during the credits, that you get to see all of these pictures. Why this guy just zooms out from nowhere to take your picture, I don't know, but there's a lot of events like that are just appearingly silly for silly's sake. The music in this game is absolutely fantastic. It's funky, it's psychedelic, it's got some good beats to it. I definitely played this game often with the sound on and nothing going on in the background like how I normally play games. There's a lot of fourth wall breaking in this game, where a lot of the characters almost know that they're in a video game, and so they're giving you tips like, hit the start button, wait, I don't know what that means, or they will, I don't want to spoil much of the story, but the player basically plays a integral part part of the game as well, you the player. So despite all of this quirkiness, there is just a level of sincerity and solemnness to it as well. For instance, when you encounter these 8 different sanctuaries and you hear these different songs, you just see like little memories from Ness, like the first time he sees his mom or the first time he's held by his dad. And the ending is very, very powerful as well. If you are interested in playing this game, maybe consider watching a playthrough of the game. It's so good at making this whole game a journey, and each moment in this journey is special. It really is easy to see, having played Undertale, where tonally, with the theme and the gameplay, it takes a lot of inspiration from EarthBound. So if you did like Undertale, maybe consider giving EarthBound a shot, because they're pretty similar, but still with their own different flares. It's funny because I wasn't even that crazy about the gameplay of this game, but it still left such an impression on me that I would give this game at least a 4 out of 5, because it's just, I've just finished it last night and it's still sticking in my mind so much. I keep finding myself thinking about it, thinking about the characters, about the theme, the story, and I'm trying to unpack it myself. I might benefit from reading somebody else's interpretation of this game, because it just feels like there's so much else under this quirky, silly surface that needs to be unpacked. Well, guys, that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about EarthBound, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye!